Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon or good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Hope all is well. Let's see who we have. Now we've got 3 people online with us. That's all right. I was kind of worried there's not going to be anybody because I didn't see anything in the chats. Okay. No comments, I mean. All right, okay. Oh, yeah, okay, so, yes. Got your message. He got into UCL, my old university. Yes, I'm gonna have a blast there. It's great around Houston. Okay, let me get my presentation in. Now this is gonna be a longer presentation than I actually wanted when I sat down to sort of just put it together a few hours ago. It ended up being much longer than I wanted, to be honest. So I'm trying to go through it. Hopefully not take too long. Yeah, and then see again, as always, if anybody wants to come on. The link is in the chat. I forgot to pin it, to be honest, this time. But I think pretty much everybody knows it's there by now. So it's fine, excuse me. I'll do it again just in case. All right, so let's go through this. So this is about the verse about, the testimony of 2 women equaling one man, right? And I just have some thoughts to share about that. Let's look at the verse. It's the longest verse in the Quran. It's near the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 282. The key part is in Arabic, but the rest I've just put in English because just to save space. So the part in Arabic is واستشهدوا شهيدين من رجالكم فإن لم يكونا رجلين فرجل وامرأتان ممن ترضون من الشهداء أن تضل إحداهما فتذكر إحداهما الأخرى. Okay, so but from the start of the verse it says, "Oh, you who have faith," of course is believed. It's just a Sahih International translation, as always. You just go for that. "Oh, you have faith, and when you contract a debt for a specified term, write it down, and let a scribe write it between you in justice. Let no scribe refuse to write as Allah has taught him. So let him write, and let the one who has the obligation dictate, and let him fear Allah, his Lord, and not leave anything out of it. But if the one who has the obligation is of limited understanding or weak or unable to dictate himself, then let his guardian dictate in justice and bring, and here's the key part, and bring to witness 2 witnesses from among your men. And if there are not 2 men available, then a man and 2 women from those whom you accept as witnesses, so that if one of them, the women errs, then the other can remind her. And the verse continues, and do not be too wary to write it, whether it is small or large, for its specified term, meaning write it all the way up to its specified term, whatever the obligation is. Then it says that is more just in the sight of Allah and stronger as evidence and more likely to prevent doubts between you, except when it is an immediate transaction which you conduct among yourselves, for then there is no blame upon you if you do not write it, and take witnesses when you conduct a contract. Let no scribe be harmed or any witness, for if you do so, indeed it is grave disobedience in you. And fear Allah, Allah teaches you, and Allah is knowing of all things. Okay. So of course this is a verse that's always, it's one which is brought up against the Quran quite regularly. And generally, the traditional apologetics around it, they're okay. There's nothing which I find particularly wrong about it. Of course, I'm talking about, I don't like the word apologetics. It sounds like you're apologizing, but it's just about, arguing for in defense of a religion or scripture. So I mean, they're fine. Some points are stronger than others. Some points are weaker. And I'm talking about the actual, decent apologetics, not just the sort of like the literalist, fanatical, unthinking people, sort of. What do they revolve around? Okay, it says in all other verses that mention testimony, the gender is not brought up, right? So this is the only verse in the Quran where gender is brought up for the witnesses, okay? And gender is only brought up here because this is a verse which is purely about financial transactions, which at the time was certainly the domain of men, right? So that's part of the apologetics around this, that this is a verse which is about transactional, financial transactions, and about finances and things like this. And this was certainly mostly the domain of men then. So that's part of it. So the apologetics goes that that two witnesses, two female witnesses in lieu of one man, only applies to these type of contracts mentioned in this verse only. Doesn't apply to other situations. Okay, and in next point, in testimonies, oaths that are taken for and against the charge of zina, right? Both spouses must take an equal number of shahadat, testimonies, same word. So in the verse about in Surah An-Nur about when you don't have witnesses for zina against your spouse, the husband is to take 4 oaths, 4 shahadat, right? And the 5th one against himself, and the wife to sort of like remove the punishment from her, has to take 4 and the 5th against herself, and then that's it. It's done, and it's left for the akhirah, for the next life. Okay. And the last point that's usually brought up is the fact that hadiths narrated by women, like Aisha, are accepted. Okay, of course, not just Aisha, even though Aisha has the most narrations out of any woman, other women as well, not just wives of the Prophet, but other women too, etc. So they don't really interest me that much. You can look up those apologetics if you like. They are still part of the discussion. But what I would like to add are just a number of thoughts and observations which I don't typically hear and you might find new or useful. Again, remember, this is all about contemplation and contemplating the Quran. So the first most important thing that I feel is lost, okay, is just to remember that this in the end is about justice, right? And justice is more important than witnesses, right? And gender arguments about witnesses. Okay, so like in a lot of things these days, what is important is lost in favor of what is less important. The argument about who the witnesses of is the testimony of a woman equal to a man. Okay, that argument and that debate becomes bloated and takes precedence over the main issue here. What is the main issue? The main issue is justice, right? It's trying to get good testimony. Okay, the number one goal is to have correct testimony for the sake of justice, so that there is no miscarriage of justice. Okay, that is more important than having equality or not of witnesses. Okay, that's not important here, right? The goal here, when there's a testimony happening, right, and put yourself in the shoes, and that is to have justice go correctly, to have the right testimony. So for argument's sake only, okay, and to put yourself in the position where it matters. And so imagine you are the innocent party, okay, the victim seeking redress in court, right? Whether this is a financial thing or not, I'm just speaking generally here, okay? And you have the option of having 2 men or 2 women testify for you, okay? And let's say, for argument's sake again, that the chances of the men giving testimony, correct testimony, is 95%, and that of the women is 90%. Okay, who do you choose? Okay, who do you choose? Are you just going to say, no, I will choose anyone just to be politically correct because I believe in equality? No, okay, obviously even women would choose the men in that situation, because the goal is justice for yourself, right? You want justice for yourself. It's not about to display being how politically correct you are. Okay, compare that to the needing a police officer, right? Women who advocate strongly that women police officers are just as good as men, right? When it's in the middle of the night and you need police, and there's a crime happening to them, and they need the police there. Who are they going to want to be there? They're not going to want a woman to come, right? They're going to want a man to come, a policeman, not a policewoman, right? So this kind of these kind of arguments, gender arguments, they lose the point of what we're really at. Okay, the police are there to fulfill a purpose. Okay, the purpose is not to show the police. The purpose of the police is not to show that men and women are equal. That's not their purpose. Their purpose is to protect. Okay, to protect and to catch criminals. Okay, so it's about who can do that better, right? So a woman who advocates strongly that they can all do just as well. No, when the reality is in place and something is happening, they're going to want a man to come over to the house in the middle of the night, policemen to come over, not policewomen, right? They'll want policemen for policewomen to go to other people, right, but not to themselves. Okay, because it's sort of like being distanced from the reality and just living in this theoretical world. Okay, no, there's a reality on the ground, right? And the same thing goes for testimony, right? We want to have justice be done, right? And for there to be no miscarriage of justice. Okay, and the reverse is also true. If the women had the 90%, 95% chance, and the men had 90% chance, then everyone should choose the women. So even with a difference of 5%, right? That it's significant, right? If you had like 100 cases, randomly, then the 5% would be, let's say, 10% will be miscarried by either men or women, depending on the scenario we're going with here, and for only 5% by the other, right? And that's significant. Okay, so just that's the very key thing to remember. Okay, that the point is justice. It's not about displaying equality between the genders. That doesn't matter. That's secondary. Okay. And that's why, hence, what does the verse say? ذَلِكَ أَقْسَطُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ وَأَقْوَمُ لِلشَّهَادَةِ وَأَدْنَى أَلَّا تَرْتَابُوا. Okay, that is more just in the sight of Allah, right? Qist, justice, right? Seeking justice, and that the whole point of this verse, the preamble before that part of the verse, and stronger as evidence, and more likely to prevent doubt between you. Okay, so it's ذَلِكَ أَقْسَطُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ وَأَقْوَمُ لِلشَّهَادَةِ وَأَدْنَى أَلَّا تَرْتَابُوا. Right, so it's 3 things. We can really only focus on the last 2. That it is aqsat عند Allah, right? That's something that we can't really have access to. Okay, but the ultimate goal is to have one, what is most upright or stronger as a shahada, as a testimony, and 2, to prevent doubt. Okay, everything else is secondary. Okay, that really needs to be appreciated. That if truly it truly is aqwam, that if it is truly is aqwam for 2 women to testify instead in lieu of a man, okay, then that is just what it should be. That is what we should want. Okay, if you are going, and that is what you would want personally. If you take away the theoreticizing and campaigning for gender equality, that's in the end, you have to look at the reality, and if that's what it would be, that's what you should want in the justice system. Okay, but the 2 points in the verse draw attention to a couple of other points often not mentioned. Okay, so the first part is very key thing: writing. It's never brought up with regard to this verse. The whole verse is really not so much about verbal testimony as it is about writing. Right. So if you just read through it, I mean, there's no other verse I think in the Quran that mentions writing as much as this verse. Right. So it says, "Oh, you have faith. When you contract a debt for a specified term, write it down, and let a scribe write it between you in justice." Okay. Let no scribe. I don't know why I say scribe here. Okay. And let no scribe refuse to write as Allah has taught him. So let him write, and let the one who has obligations dictate. So you see how packed that is with regard to writing. Okay, so it seems to be that the focus here is about the writing. Yeah, it's all about the writing. And the witness and testimony here later required is actually for and about what it was written, right? What's the testimony for here? It's about what's written, what's being written. Okay, it isn't about what I don't know what was said or something, right? This whole thing is about writing. It's about the verses commanding us, hey, write this down, right? These things so that you don't doubt and about what was written, about who owes what to who, and etc. All of that, write it down. Okay, write it. And the witnesses are there for what? To testify for what? To testify for what was written, for what was written. Okay. This, I think, is a point. It's typically missed in apologetics to explain that this, that this verse is all about just finances, right? That the reason why that women, this is needed because we're talking about financial transactions, and men were in charge of the finances, and women knew less about finances, so that's why But what's being called upon to testify to, it's not about knowledge of the finances, right? It's about what was written. Okay, they have to testify for what was written. So up to that point, you see how heavy the verse is in mentioning writing, and you must write, and dictating. Okay, and let the person write, and etc., and write everything down. Okay, then the verse mentions the two women to witness what was written. The two men should witness. You should call two men to witness what was written, or a man and two women, right? And then again, we're back to writing. Okay, so then the verse continues after that part, the part and the discussion. And do not be too wary to write it, whether it is small or big, for its specific term. Okay, which is also going to be part of that written. That is more just on the side of Allah and stronger as evidence, and more likely to prevent doubt between you. Okay. So the real uprightness or strongness of evidence that's been mentioned here, that we're being pushed towards, is having it written down. Okay, having it written down. I've written here, hint, hadiths, right? That it's about writing. Right? Aqwa min al-shahada is having it written down. It's not about the memorization. Okay, so if the testimony is about writing, really, then the question changes. The question becomes, how many women then could read and write and testify to what was written easily at the time? Okay, is that the real issue then? Okay, is it that they weren't, reading and writing wasn't so common at the time, right? In Arabia, and what was the difference between the level of the literary ability, literacy ability between men and between women at the time? I would assume that among women it was less. And so that could be part of the explanation about why. Okay, why was it that why is this verse saying, okay, if you don't find two men who can testify to what was written down, right, then two women. Okay, perhaps because just jointly they would be able to sort of combine efforts to testify to what was written. Okay, and so I've written it, and so is so that if one of them errs, then the other can remind her really about erring in reading. Okay, because in a society where few could read and write, women read and wrote even less. So I've put a couple of notes at the end over here as well. It said they'll also note that nothing is mentioned about the scribe having to be a man, right? So the scribe doesn't have to be a man, it seems, in this thing. It just says it has to be a scribe, somebody who can write, whoever God has taught them to write. And let no scribe, refuse to write as God has taught him. Okay, and that could be a woman. Another note, this insistence on writing is only mentioned in these cases regarding future debts, okay, which lends further credence to that the two women testimony in lieu of a man is only for such transactions as well. It's only for such transactions. I mean, it is interesting that the only verse which talks about this which mentions gender disparity when it comes to witnessing, is all linked to the writing. Okay, it's all linked to the writing. All the other verses in the Quran which talk about testimony and testifying, you're not testifying to things which were written down, right? It's not about something which was written down. Next part, I'd like to say. So these, a lot of these are a string of thoughts that I'm just putting out there, as we said, contemplations. Okay, so confidence. What did I write at the end over here? All right, so at the end of here, further credence to it's only for such transactions as well. Anyway, so confidence, which leads us to the second point that the verse mentions. It says, وَأَدْنَا أَلَّا تَرْتَابُوا, right? And it's more likely to prevent you from doubting. So have doubts between you. Okay, so it's about one of the reasons for this is to prevent doubt, right? Because society will not abide by judgments of court or these kind of things if they doubt the process, right? If you doubt that the testimony of a woman is equal to that of a man, if society doubts that, then it's just going to create chaos if you try to sort of enforce it. Okay, so one of the reasons for the above, the 2 women for 1 man, is that the Arab society at the time had very low confidence in the testimony of women. Okay, they doubted it. Perhaps only with regards to financial debt. I don't know, but the pre-Islamic mentality here needs to be investigated. So there needs to be investigation into the pre-Islamic mentality with regards to the testimony of women. Okay, was the testimony of women, accepted at all? Okay, perhaps it was not accepted at all, and this could be seen like a step up, right? But the point is, in the end, it has to, whatever the step goes towards, it has to give confidence to the society for these kind of transactions to go smoothly, so that there's no discord and disharmony in society when it comes to debt and financial things. We have to have confidence. People have to have confidence that things have been recorded properly, right? And perhaps this is just what the Arabs at the time would accept, right? They would not accept that the testimony of a woman be equal to that of a man in these situations. So the Quran recommends 2, right? In order to prevent doubt, okay, which is more important. And remember, the point here is justice and having the testimony done right. It doesn't really matter. It's not about judging the genders. Okay, the goal is justice. The goal is to have the transactions go smoothly, so that nobody starts to bicker, falling out. Have feuds. Potential violence because of money. A lot of trouble happens because of money. Okay, so perhaps this is to prevent doubt, which is again more important than for the matter at hand than proving gender equality. Right, that isn't the point here. Okay, give people the confidence that they need in order to be happy with their transactions, their financial transactions. Okay, another thing which is often missed, okay, that this is often framed. So it says here, let's look at that part of the verse. It says, and bring to witness 2 witnesses from among your men. وَاسْتَشْهِدُوا شَهِيدَيْن مِنْ رِجَالِكُمْ. An interesting thing is it says, وَاسْتَشْهِدُوا, doesn't say, what to be shahidain min rijalikum. It says, وَاسْتَشْهِدُوا شَهِيدَيْن مِنْ رِجَالِكُم. Right, I'll bring this up later again. But it just says, bring for 2 witnesses from among your men. Then it says, and if there are not 2 men available, then a man and 2 women from those whom you accept as witnesses. And this part is often framed as either 2 men or 1 man and 2 women. That you can either do this or this. But that isn't accurate. That isn't what the verse is saying. More accurately is that you can't actually use 1 man and 2 women. Okay, if 2 men are available, right? It's a conditional statement, right? It says, bring 2 men as witnesses. Only if you can't find 2 men. Only if you can't find 2 men, then you can bring a man and 2 women, right? Now, that's important because it could have just said, okay, bring 2 men or a man and 2 women. But it doesn't say that. It says, it's a key part of the verse, right? I mean, it says, فَإِن لَمْ يَكُونَا رَجُلَيْن, right? فَإِن لَمْ يَكُونَا, if you can't find two men, if you can't find them, okay, then a man and two women, okay, which opens up, the question, what kind of situation is the latter, right? So what situations would you have where, most situations, I suppose, you'd be able to find two men, right? But what situation would you possibly be in where you can't find two men to testify to something that was written down, okay? Or let's just say to, if you don't accept the idea that this is about testifying to what was written, then just two men to testify, okay? It is one in which there is a situation where there are many women, but only one man, it seems, right? So you've got a situation where there's maybe at least two or more women, but there's only one man, okay? And that's why you can bring that one man to testify, and then you bring two other women from whoever you are pleased with, right? Which is why, that part of it, and if there are not two men, then a man and two women from those whom you accept as witnesses. From those whom you accept as witnesses, that has to be about two women, right? It can't be about the man, because there's no other choice. There's only one man, right? There's only one man, it seems, right? Unless you want to take it as, even that first man, maybe he's not even, maybe there's more men, but there's only one man who is able to testify to the writing, illiterate man as well, if you think about it in terms of writing again. But the point is that we're talking about, two different situations, right? So the alternative would be that there is, let's go of that situation where there's one man, okay, and many women, and that's the situation that you're in. You're going to have to bring one man and two women. So the alternative would be that a man and a woman must come alone together, right? If you were to make the testimony sort of the same, right? And then instead of two men, you get, okay, just bring a man and a woman. Okay, now these two must come alone together. Okay, they are going to be testifying. Okay, and if the ones requiring the testimony are both men, so that there's the person who is given a debt, and then the one who is being indebted, right? These are the two, and they want this to be written down and witnessed. Let's say these two are both men. So you have these two which are both men. Let's say the scribe is also a man, right? And now you're going to bring another man to testify, and then there's going to be just one woman there. Okay, so that's four men alone with that one woman. Okay, and that is something that needs to be thought of about this as well. Okay, even though it isn't mentioned as a reason in the verse, not really. Okay, let's see, or is it? I mean, can you look at this part of the verse which says أن تضل إحداهما فتذكر إحداهما الأخرى? Could that be also about safety? Okay, reminding her that the second woman would remind the first woman not to stray. Okay, because that's what it literally says أن تضل إحداهما فتذكر إحداهما الأخرى, right? Not to stray and be unsafe, or not losing one's way, literally going astray en route to giving testimony, because ultimately, and this is something else I'm going to bring up, it is only the testimony of one that is required. Okay, but the point is that she must get there safely. So is that a possibility when looking at this? But the point is that the situation being painted here is one that needs to be thought of. Okay, the command given to them, those back then, of course, in the Prophet's time, is to seek out two men for witnesses. Okay, for witnessing the right of these transactions. Only when two are not available, okay, and we need to think about where, when, what type of situation. Situations are there with not even two men to be found, but only then do you seek out a man and two women. Okay, so this could be just because of the situation. Okay, because of the situation you find yourself in, right? It's not really about it's not really because of the gender issue as much as it is because that's the situation. Okay, now why would a man and two women be available? Because if there are women in the vicinity, they would likely be with at least one man. Okay, at least one male escort, right? If there's two, then you found your two, right? You found your two witnesses. Okay, but if there's, if there's a group, if there's going to be a group of women, then maybe there's only one witness there, one man. Okay, so you bring the man as a witness and two women. Okay, so this could be due to that situation as well. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to mention here is the next part of the verse says, except when it is an immediate transaction. So except when it is an immediate transaction which you conduct among yourselves, for then there is no blame upon you if you do not write it. So again, we're going back to writing. But then it says, and take witnesses when you conclude a contract. So even then, you don't have to write it, but you should have some witnesses. Okay. Now, during immediate transaction, it doesn't need to be written, yet they are told to still take witnesses. And here, the gender is not mentioned. So here again, we're going back to the gender is not mentioned. Okay. Now, is the gender not mentioned again here because now we're not concerned about writing? It's an immediate transaction. It's not going to be in writing done. So again, I think there's a lot which is linking this to the writing. Okay, I think here that there's a lot that is linking this concept of two women in lieu of one man. It is being linked to the writing, to be testifying towards the writing itself, about the writing itself. So here the question becomes, does the two men in lieu of a woman apply here as well, right at the end? And here I don't think it does. I'd say, if the issue is really about writing, as explained previously, and obviously no, it doesn't apply. Okay, it doesn't apply. And I think that's most likely because even women who are buying and selling in women-only spaces need to do this, right? So women who are buying and selling and making immediate transactions wherever they are, they also need to get witnesses, right? They need to get witnesses, right? So they will just get two women witnesses. Whoever's there, I need two witnesses. Okay. Plus, of course, like we said, that the woman can write, can be a scribe. For the previously as well, but the point is that here, without the writing being mentioned, it doesn't seem that for immediate transactions, it doesn't seem that you have this thing where a man, two women in lieu of a man. Okay, these are instant transactions. It is just impractical to go scouting for a scribe, let alone gender-specific witnesses, right? So that's another thing to put in mind. Now, here's what I mentioned before about the function. So again, pay careful attention to what the verse is actually saying. It says, أن تضل إحداهما فتذكر إحداهما الأخرى. So that if one of the women errs, makes an error, makes a mistake, تضل, ضلال, same word, right, goes astray, then the other can remind her. Okay, and this is a key thing because the second woman actually doesn't testify. Okay, it's not as it's usually framed, right? That you're going to have the testimony of one man, of either two men, or you're going to have the testimony of one man and two women. It's not that. It's still two testimonies and two testimonies. Okay? It is still two testimonies, just like when there are two men testifying. Okay? It isn't two testimonies is equal to three testimonies. It is still two men testifying is equal to one man and one woman testifying. Okay, the function of the second woman is not to testify. She doesn't testify. Okay, it is to remind the other if she errs or goes astray. Okay, that's her function. But the testimony needed is only that of that one woman. Okay, the memory that's going to be given of that testimony is hers and hers alone. Okay, it isn't the others. Okay, if the second tries to remind the first of something she doesn't remember, okay, then that isn't part of the testimony. Right, so I still see this as being in that way. I mean, it's important to see this that the function here is mentioned, that the second woman is there to remind the first woman. The first woman is the one who gives the testimony. The second woman, she's not part of the testimony. It's still shahidain, right? And so going back to the earlier part of the verse, when it says "wastashhidu shahidain," and bring to witness two witnesses. Why is it put in that sort of sentence structure? Wastashhidu shahidain, get two witnesses, right? It's still two testimonies. Okay, it's either two men testifying or a man and a woman testifying, and a second woman is just there to remind the first woman. Okay, and yes, I know that that part of the verse continues with "and bring two witnesses." And bring to witness two witnesses from your men. It says that, yeah. But the point is obviously to reach the two testimonies. That's the point. وَاسْتَشْهِدُوا شَهِيدَيْنِ. You want this to reach this two testimony. Okay, so it's two testimonies still. Okay, and this function. So this is what I always say. I mean, all of this, a lot of this has got to do with the past and things like this. Is what I say. The main thing which I say, to be honest, about this verse and how it's how we would see it now or applied now. This function, that of the second woman, is completely mute and irrelevant today. Okay, it's completely mute and completely irrelevant today. Why? Because it's done by courts. Okay, it's done by courts and trained judges and lawyers. Okay, this verse is instructions and guidance for a very primitive people in terms of infrastructure and systems. Okay, they had none. They didn't have any court systems or how to give testimony, or how to question a witness. They didn't have that. Okay, that doesn't mean it doesn't apply today. There are places where this can still be useful now. It can still be useful now, like other things in the Quran. Okay, this is something that needs no training. It needs no infrastructure. It doesn't need a robust system. Okay, it's trying to push to more confidence and better accuracy in giving testimony and pushing towards better justice, okay, in a straightforward way that doesn't really require anything. Okay, you don't need a court system, you don't need any training, you don't need any of that, okay? And of course, again, it's also very specific to that time. If we think about, again, the issue of writing and, the literacy among women, and there was a man who owned, who looked after the finances, etc. Okay, but the point is that now, however, we have judges and lawyers and a whole science of interrogation and how to question and phrase questions in order to help a witness give a full testimony with all of the details and without influencing them and leading the witness. Okay, that job now, the function of the second woman, that's done by lawyers. It's done by judges. Okay, it's not needed. It's not needed at all in our court systems. Okay, the point is أن تضل إحداهم فتذكر إحداهما الأخرى, so that the other one can remind the former. That's done now. Okay, we don't need that. Okay, so I'm sure we've all seen how courts work, right? With how lawyers take turns in interrogating and investigating a witness, right? And how a judge presides over the proceedings. Objection, hearsay. Objection leading, please have that stricken from the record, and instruct the members of the jury to ignore it, etc. Right? These are, there's a whole court system in place, and the way that judges and lawyers go about their business and what they're allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say and how they should question, how they are not allowed to question, right? The ways to bring the most unbiased detailed recollection from the witness. Okay, people are trained for that now. Okay, we don't need it doesn't need just a second woman just because just to remind that that's not needed. Okay, so of all that, there is no need for a second woman to remind and prevent the first one from erring or going astray. Okay, and that is not to mention, of course, signed contracts now, receipts, digital transactions, email confirmations, two-step verification. We're talking about this kind of, financial transactions and debts and, debts for long term, whether, mortgages, whatever it is. This is all done now. Paperwork is there. Things are signed electronically, photocopied, right? All of that is done. Okay. For most important financial transactions now, there is zero need for any witnesses, really. You don't need witnesses. It's all archived in some way. Okay. And in fact, relying on witnesses, okay, gives less strength to the testimony of these things now. Okay. You need to show receipts, right? You need to show receipts. Having receipts is better now. These digital receipts, all these kind of things is better than testimony. Then there's having just a testimony there. Now, is that foolproof? I'm not a financial expert. There are ways to commit fraud and these kind of things. So maybe there'll always be a place for some amount of testimony. But in terms of reminding one woman reminding the other. That's not needed in court systems. Okay. So again, remember that justice and the best testimony is the goal and what is important. Right? That's the goal here. But the point is that without a skilled judge or clever advocate, a witness is just somebody who tells a story. That's what it comes down to, right? So when you think about, in Arabia at that time, and people being called to testify to something, or come here, we're writing this transaction. You do it, write it, that's it, and then okay, yeah, we've witnessed it, and they go away. What happens later is when they're called upon to give testimony, they just tell the story. They're telling their story. They're telling what they saw and what happened. And if there's no skilled judge or advocate or lawyer type of person there questioning to bring out the information, okay, then it's just people telling their story. Okay, and how men and women tell stories, they can differ. Okay, it can differ. We're going to come to that a little bit later. So this is an area that needs real research. Without prompting and questioning, how do men and women compare in how they give testimony, in what and in what details they relate, recall, and focus on, right? Do women and women differ in that? Okay, because again, we're talking here about this verse is advice for a primitive society, no infrastructure, no system of judges and lawyers and these kind of things. If you just get men and women to relate, give their testimony, just tell them, hey, tell us what happened, and without questioning, do men and women differ? Do they differ? Okay. Now there's of course research on that. There are some research which is related sort of to this sort of thing, which is that it's known for a while. Men are more interested in things, while women are more interested in people, right? So given testimony about things, okay, it's men are better at that than women, and women are better at giving testimony about people, right? And there's a little bit of research I'm going to show in a minute for that. And that matters. If we are going to talk about testimony regarding things, this matters, right? And that's what it is here. We're talking about debts and finances and these kind of things. Number two, men are more analytically minded. More left side of the brain geared towards that. Generally, have a greater interest and ability with maths and numbers, right? So again, that matters if we are going to talk about testimony regarding finances and contracts and amounts of time and these sort of things, right? And of course, such differences will be even more exacerbated in less educated, more primitive people, right? While high level of education for both genders, it narrows that gap a lot. Perhaps to nothing. I don't know, but again, these sort of things need to be researched, right? It needs research, real investigation without any political or gender biases. Okay, there is some. All right, there is some things which are like this. So here, for example, I just want to put a few quotes from some abstracts of papers, research papers. I haven't read the full papers or the experimentals. You have to subscribe to these services to be able to read them. And even if I could read them, am I skilled enough to read these kind of psychology and social science papers? Probably not. Okay, but if anybody does have the skill to read that kind of stuff, and they have, I don't know, through their university account or something, been able to read these kind of things, go for it and leave a comment about them a bit. So here we have from the Journal of Applied Social Psychology. It says adult age and gender differences and eyewitness recall in field settings. So this is just a part from the abstract. It says women are significantly more accurate than men women are significantly more accurate than men in accuracy of recall for weight, okay, and for characteristics judged to be more important than less important for person memory, right? Person memory, right? So if you're in a court and you need to find you're a victim of something, and there's a bunch of witnesses you can call up to identify a perpetrator. Okay, you'd probably want a woman there, right? If a bunch of people saw your attacker, and you had to choose between a man or woman to give the description of the perpetrator, you'd probably choose a woman. She'd be more accurate with the weight. She'd be more accurate with, I don't know, what he was wearing, what color socks he has, his shoes, right? Women can notice these things, right? Men, we don't notice these things as much, okay? So things for personal memory, okay? Then it goes on, says male and female, etc. Where's the next part which I highlighted? Okay. And then it talks about here at the end, it says women made significantly longer duration estimations. Women made significantly longer duration estimates of the encounters with the targets than did men. Okay, so again, that's a difference. Men overestimate the duration by only a 2-to-1 ratio, right? Women overestimated by 3-to-1 ratio. Okay, so if you were going to have somebody testify for something like this, an encounter, and this is about, I think this is about a violent attacker, right? So if if it's important, for establishing a timeline, right? And you're a victim and you want somebody to testify for the length of time the attack went out, you'd want the man, right? He'd be more accurate, okay? The woman might overestimate the time ratio. So the point is there are these differences, okay, between how men and women, what they focus on when they testify, when they're going to tell stories. And these are all, the men and women in these studies are all questions, they're being prompted to ask certain questions. Right? These are not there's not exactly the Qur'anic scenario here where someone just has to give a raw testimony. Here's another one. This comes from Science Direct. The study its title is Sex Differences in Eyewitness Memory. Females are more accurate than males for details related to people and less accurate for details surrounding them, and feel more anxious and threatened in neutral but potentially threatening context. Okay, so again, that's a difference. Okay, also, female participants were more accurate than males for stranger-related details and less accurate than males for details related to the surroundings. Okay, so again, if you're in a situation where you need the testimony about things which is happening around, remember, I'm trying to put you in a situation where you need the justice being done to you. You need justice being said. All that talk about gender equality is going to go out the window, right? You're in the middle of a trial or something. You want to have redress of justice. You don't want injustice done to you, right? And if depending on the situation, if the testimony of a man is better, you would want the man. If the testimony of a woman is better, you'd want the woman. Okay, it's just that simple. Here's another one, Taylor and Francis, gender effects in eyewitnesses accounts of violent crimes. So here we have, 80 male and 84 female university students saw a film showing a simulated manslaughter with either male or female perpetrator. Where's the part highlighted? It's very difficult to see which part I made in bold on this program. Double memory of crimes. Okay, so it says a female advantage was found in overall memory of the crime, and both a male perpetrator and a male victim were assigned more culpability than the female counterparts. Right, so the women actually were more biased against the men in these situations. Right. So what it says here, it suggests that females may have more elaborate categories for person information than males, which facilitate in female accuracy, etc. Alternatively, blah, blah, blah. And at the end it says, so again, it says, may reflect a female advantage in episodic memory performance, okay? And it says at the end here, the stereotype assimilation is suggested to account for the differential evaluation of a male and female perpetrator victim. So if you are an innocent male being accused of a violent crime, you'd perhaps rather not have women witnesses, right, against you, right, because that would make it more difficult for you to receive justice. Okay, so even lawyers understand such differences that exist in jury trials. Okay, which is why they're allowed to dismiss jurors, right? So lawyers from both sides, they can look at all the potential jurors, and they start to dismiss. Okay, I don't want this person, I don't want this one. For the best outcome for their clients, right? And women, gender is part of that decision as well. Okay. So I wrote here, but in all of these studies, I think the witnesses are being, they're being questioned, right? They're not given their raw testimony or stories. Nevertheless, a slight difference between men and women does show up, right? Anecdotally, however, I think that most of us know that men, when they're telling a story, focus a lot more on the facts and the details. Okay, this is so well understood anecdotally that it makes it into comedy, right? And what they say, it's funny because it's true. And here is going to be my second attempt to try to show a video here, but it didn't work. So I'm going to share the screen of the other tab. Give me a second. Get rid of that. I think I'll stop sharing this first. This is going to be something from the great Dave Chappelle, if anybody's into his comedy. Let's see if I can get this working this time. And with sound.
Everything's based on how they feel.
Now, just to check, can you hear that? Somebody just in the chat, just let me know if the sound worked there in that little test. And yes, would suffice. Yes. All right, thanks, Brad. All right, so this is Dave Chappelle, just talking about the differences in how men and women tell their story. It's just comedy, of course, but a lot of comedy is sort of like the exaggeration of certain truths to the point of ludicrousy, to make you laugh, right? But as what we're told, right? It's funny because it's true, and generally a lot of the times that is.
You can hear when they tell stories. You ever hear a man tell a story? It'd be just facts. Who, what, when, where, why. It was me and Bob. We was at Safeway. Then that nigga Bob said this. Then I punched that nigga, and then I broke out. That's the story. That's the story. Women tell stories, all these feelings. Well, first of all, you have to understand, I was on my period, and I just talked to my mother, so I was feeling like God damn, it was too many feelings. What the fuck happened? Get to it.
So that's the great Dave Chappelle. But you get the point. You get the idea. I mean, it's there even in anecdotally, in comedy, right? In life experience. Okay, we generally see that, right? When women are relating things, they don't focus as much on the facts as much, right? And that's fine. Okay, but when the testimony is needed about the facts, all right, it matters. Okay, when you're seeking justice and correct testimony, it matters, right? And the opposite is true as well. That's when it comes to personal information and person details, women are better. Okay, so if you want testimony there, that's where you're going to go for, right? So again, this shows, I think, that this verse really is more about the transaction aspect, right? And it doesn't two women in lieu of a man doesn't flow out into testimony and everything. Okay. So another idea, so you could put in as well here is the testimony of the second woman is sort of like what Dave Chappelle said at the end there, get to it, right? The part of those says أن تضل إحداهما فتذكر إحداهما الأخرى, that the other one sort of is to remind the first one to stay on the facts. Okay, don't go out into all these other things. All right, we're here to testify for the facts. So stay on the facts. Is that that's another thing about it? Is that what it means? Okay, for somebody to have somebody less intimidating, the other men there, right, telling her get to it, making her flustered. Instead, have another woman there who is basically reminding her to stay on the fact. أن تضل إحداهما, so that if one of them strays off topic, right? فَتُذَكِّرْ إِحْدَاهُمَا الْأُخْرَى, so the other one can remind her, stay on topic, give the testimony, and that's it, right? So that's part. What else do I have? What's next? I forgot. Okay, yeah, finally, that was it. That was just for yourself. So finally, the final question, does all of that raise the chances for you, right? If you're going to think about this verse, right? Does it, and research which is there or not, right? Again, I'm just, all of these ideas I'm just putting out there. I generally do think that when it comes to the modern court systems, that the lawyers and judges take care of all of that. There's no need for one woman to two men, right? Two men is perfectly fine, so long as you have somebody skilled there to question, right? To question both the men and women, of course, right? To whatever will raise the level of testimony, right? But the point is, the final point, does all of that raise the chance, even by 5%, that two men, okay, will give better, raw testimony than two women, okay? Is that true in all situations? If you accept that, is that true in all situations or just in financial? When we're talking about raw testimony without trained lawyers or judges being involved, okay? That is what it comes down to, I think, okay? Because that is what it should come down to for yourself if you ever need a witness, okay? You will not care in the thick of things about gender equality, nor should you, okay? That's not the goal of a court system, okay? It's not the goal of testimony. It's not to show how you weigh the genders or who you think is better. That doesn't matter, okay? Neither for you or for others. Okay, so for others as well, you shouldn't care for other people if they would rather have two men or two women as witnesses. Okay, you should care what will give the best testimony. Okay, what will bring us closer to justice. Okay, you should care about having the highest chance for justice and the lowest chance for its miscarriage. And it should be tested and verified, of course. I mean, studies need to be done, but people don't study, won't do these studies now. And could they even be fairly and impartially done in the current environment? No, can that even be done? Where even physical biological differences between genders, they're being ignored, right? Where people are scared to answer, questions, who are physically stronger, men or women. I saw this street interview where somebody just went around asking people who are physically stronger, right? To just random people, right? Both men and women. They ask them who's physically stronger, men and women, and almost nobody would answer a man. Actually, nobody answered that men were stronger. They just wouldn't. Okay, that's the environment that we're in. There's a literal, طغيان, right? This oppressive sort of atmosphere that pushes away the truth. Okay, it makes people ignore the truth. And the same person would ask those same people who is more intelligent, men and women, and a lot of them said women are more intelligent. Okay, that's just where we are right now. Okay, but the point is here, it doesn't matter even if women are more intelligent, or women are more stronger, or whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters here is we're talking about testimony, and we want to find, if you want to have justice done, you want to find, those who will give the best testimony, right? And I think we already have that in the modern world, like I said, of the court systems and lawyers and judges. They overrule all of that. Okay, this verse and these kind of like many things in the Quran. Okay, they're just for the sort of like primitive environment, no infrastructure, no training, no systems, no science behind how to do these kind of things, right? And this is just to push towards that. And again, I also think it's very, very strongly linked to the writing. Okay, it's not mentioned often. The focus in apologetics about this verse is mostly about the finances, saying that this is about financial transactions, that it only applies to financial transactions. I think it could be more about the writing, because we're talking about witnesses for the writing. Okay, and it could have to do with just the literacy standards among women at the time. Okay, so those are my thoughts on that. Hope you found them useful, and thank you for listening. Let's see who we have in the chat. All right. A new username I've never seen here. Assalamu alaikum. How are you? Skibili. I love the usernames. Huh? Muhammad, how you doing? Good to see you again. Hector, assalamu alaikum. Hope you're well. Of course, Adriana, always a pleasure. Brad Childers is here. And Prayas, good to see you. By the way, there's nobody waiting backstage. If anyone wants to come on, feel free. Either discuss this or present some ideas, some contemplation of your own, feel free. If nobody comes on in like five minutes or so, I'll close this up. Shakur Ahmed, see these are generous. See these as a generosity to women because they do have more personal responsibilities to deal with. Not sure what you mean by that. If you could explain again below. Says two trusted men. Yeah. Well, I mean, the verse doesn't mention that, but yes, generally, other verses do mention that they have to be dawa adlin, right? But this verse doesn't say that, right? Which makes me wonder if it's really about, again, it's more about the writing, it seems to me. Because when something is written down, right, it's less important for the person sort of like witnessing that to be very, very trustworthy, right? Like not lying, not this or whatever. All you have to do is testify that, yep, that's the document that was signed by these two people, right? Yep, that's what was written down on it. There's not much room for error there, I suppose. But again, I mean, this needs to be thought of more. But that's what I would say. Yes, hear it. Sounds good. Dave Chappelle, of course, yes. And we have a question here. Alan, salam Khalid. Question: in what historical context were these verses revealed? I'm not sure. I mean, these are in Surah Al-Baqarah, so we're talking about right at the beginning of the Medina period, right? So we're talking about the period where, right after Hijrah, and of course, the new communities there, it's been built up, and of course, they're going to start to make transactions and, take on debt for a certain period of time. So it's that sort of situation. I'm not sure about the Asbab and Nuzul, which are very flaky anyway. Okay, like what's the context of where this verse was revealed in what? It's not thing. Now, by the way, the sort of the verse, the verse after it. Okay, we're still talking about testimony and again about writing, right? So it says when kuntum ala safarin. So if you are on a journey, okay. So what part of the context of this verse is that you're not on a journey, right? Because the next verse is talking about if you're on a journey. Right? When kuntum ala safarin walam tajidu katiban, and you don't find a writer, you don't find a scribe. Okay, farihanun maqbuda. Okay, farihanun maqbuda. So then you have a sort of like a pledge in hand, right? A pledge in hand, that should suffice. Okay. فإن أمن بعضكم بعضا فليؤدي الذي اؤتمن أمانته وليتق الله ربه ولا يكتم الشهادة وما يكتمها فإنه آثم قلبه, etc. Right. So again, here in that one, it doesn't mention the gender. Right. There's nothing about the gender issue. Right. Because it doesn't seem like that verse which talks about you when you're on a journey. Okay. There's not going to be many people around you to bring as witnesses for what's written. Okay, and even then, this verse is now talking about you can't find a writer. There's nobody around you who knows how to write. Okay, when kuntum ala safarin walam tajidu katiban, and if you're on a journey and you don't find it, you can't find somebody who can write. Okay, farihanun maqbuda. Okay, so next verse again, it talks about that, right? And then you have after that. The last three verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, the last three famous verses there. Yeah. I mean, these verses are exactly about that. It's about, they're all there to alleviate a problem. I mean, when you look at any of these kind of verses, like this verse here, It's there because they didn't have they didn't have their own way to manage this properly, right? If they had their own way to manage this properly, this verse wouldn't be there. Okay, and so it comes down to that. A lot of these things you can think about in that way, right? When you find the Quran blaming people for something, it's generally because the people then were doing it, right? When it's speaking about the community in Medina about something, it's because they did it. If it's blaming them for something, it's because they did it, right? So this verse is about that. I mean, it's clearly because this is something that they needed, right? Because it looked like what was happening is that people were making these transactions, these getting into these debts, but then afterwards everybody was doubting. Like imagine that you somebody borrows some money from you, right? A large sum of money and says, "I'll pay you back after this amount of time," right? And then you give him and that's it. Then you part ways. A few months later you come together and you're like, "Hey, you're supposed to pay me that button money now." He says, "No, it's not now. I didn't say now. I said I'll pay you next month." Saying, "No, you said now." "No, it was next month." And then also the amount. I brought this amount of money from you. "No, you didn't. You brought this amount," right? So this creates strife. Really creates strife among people. I mean, wealth is something that people kill for and die for and stress about and things like this, right? So the point of this is to again, as the verse said, the part which I stressed the most, which I should probably leave on the screen, okay, that this is really in the end about justice, right? We're trying to avoid those sort of squabbles. Okay, we're trying to avoid those squabbles. So they were obviously happening, right? We're trying to avoid those squabbles. We're trying to have justice. We're trying to have accuracy in testimony, right? So that nobody doubts, right? We don't want people doubting each other. That this person is tricking me. He's running off. He's stealing from me. Half my money is going, etc., like that, right? And again, that's one of the reasons why 2 women in lieu of a man is needed, because then people will be like, "No, I don't trust this." Yeah, 2 men witnessing this, I will trust that, but I'm not going to trust 2 women or just a man and a woman trusting, testifying. No, but they would trust a man and 2 women. Okay, so maybe it just has to do with the mentality of the people then, because again, the point is ذلك أدنى, right? Where is it? ذلك أقسط عند الله. It's more just in the sight of Allah. وأقوم للشهادة, and more, putting upright of the shahada, of testimony. وأدنى أن لا ترتابوا. Okay, and more befitting that so you don't doubt. This part could be the part which is more related to the men, the 2 women in lieu of a man. That they, like us, okay, maybe we shouldn't doubt. We probably don't, most of us, right? But they probably doubted that to have the testimony of 2 women, right? And in any case, like I said, the situation is also odd that it's put in. It's saying find 2 men, but if you don't find 2 men, so that means the asl, what you're supposed to find is 2 men. It's only if you don't find 2 men that can witness this writing that you then seek out a man and 2 women. And again, I've mentioned a lot of reasons why that could be. The things that you can take away and think about. Yes, of course. Yeah. I mean, the Quran doesn't, for example, tell anybody to put, there's no punishment for in prison. There's no prison sentences given in the Quran. Okay, even though the Quran is aware of prisons, right? Like in Surah Yusuf, right? Yusuf enters spirit, but what's he going to do, right? The thief and the thief puts him in prison for how many years? You don't have prisons. You don't have prisons. If prisons were built, if there had been prisons then, you would probably see verses which have prison sentences for certain things, right? But it isn't there, and Quran is not going to force you to build prisons. Right? God is not micromanaging us in that way. where no, you have to have prisons. Imagine if there was a verse like that, people would say now we have to have prisons, and it's part of the Quran to have prisons. No, we don't have to have prisons. The goal is always just justice, and we are able to understand justice, right? I mean, this is one thing that we need to really be able to understand, right? We shouldn't be like donkeys for with books, right? We are human beings. We can understand justice, and the point of these of the messengers themselves and the books revealed was that mankind can establish justice, right? That's the goal. Okay, the goal isn't to have two men, two women for a man in testimony. That isn't a goal. The goal is justice. So yes, we are supposed to definitely advance, right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can through the Quran. I think you can build like the solutions that the Quran gives, and it doesn't give all the solutions. People think they give it's given solutions to what's happened to the problems that were there, the things that were happening there at the time. It's answering things which were there, pointing towards justice. Things that were not there were not there. All right. The things that happened later after its time, and we have to come up with justice for it and solutions as best we can. Okay, that Quran is exhorting us towards justice because we understand it. It's part of our fitrah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, society creates these gender issues. Yeah, exactly. 100% justice is a God-given faculty given to every human being, and that's a great comment to leave there. All right, okay. So it doesn't look like anybody's going to be coming on. So if nobody has anything else, if you'd like to comment, I think we can leave it there, right? Yep, I think so. All right, okay. So, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Anan. So thank you everybody for coming on. Jazakallah khair for attending, and I hope it was useful. If anybody is able to access and read the research on this type of differences between testimony between men and women, please go ahead and enlighten us on that maybe next time in the comments or something. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, ask, suggest that one last thing. Jazakallah khair. Thank you, Adriana. Yes, they stream about specifying the terms of the supernatural, like genes and magic, because there are a lot of misconceptions. I'm sure, I mean, we could try and do that. I mean, I generally just present on things which have been my own thoughts. I don't, these sort of things, I haven't really thought much about them. There is this idea that jinns are the sort of like the hidden people, like jinn, just like shayateen. You have shayateen, jinn and ins. There's this idea of a difference between jinn and jan, right? That you have jinn and jan. But anyway, yes, well, why not? We'll have a look at that and see if there's anything for that comes up. Any ideas that come up for that. We can do a stream about that as well. Because yes, you're right, there's a lot of superstition about them. Mufti Abu Layth has a lot about that, but of course he is very sort of like anti-miracle, supernatural, that kind of stuff. But he makes a lot of good points that it's only among Muslim people that they get jinn possessed, right? And other people don't seem to get jinn possessed, and these sort of things. But it's not something that I look into terribly much, to be honest. But if something comes up, I will definitely be sure to do so. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, for that verse, it's talking about eat whatever you want from the trees, right? From the Jannah, right? Eat from the Jannah, whatever you want, and that just means the trees, the fruits of the trees, and these sort of things. So, certainly, pig is not included, right? Nor any other animal. It's just talking about the garden. فَكُلَا مِنْهَا رَغَدًا حَيْثُ شِئْتُمَا, right? Like, eat from it whatever you like. It's talking about the trees, right? لا تقرب هذه الشجرة, but don't, approach this tree. Okay, so I mean, you have to keep it within the category of trees. All right, okay. I think we'll leave it there. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for coming. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. They were vegetarians? Yeah, I think they were vegetarians. No meat, no slaughtering yet. They were vegans, maybe. No meat slaughtering yet. That's one thing. I mean, it just talks about eating from a tree. Maybe they eat other things there as well, but what is mentioned about eat whatever you want, it's really just talking about the trees of Jannah. That's what the whole context is. Okay? All right. Assalamu alaikum. Take care of yourselves. Until next time.